Hello.
Sir, just a minute, sir.
Hmm.
Now you start. Now you start.
Good afternoon, all the participants, ladies and gentlemen, all the senior dignitaries, dean, directors of Agriculture University, Jabalpur, and other participants from other states and the state of Madhya Pradesh from the different academic institutions. It is a great pleasure for me to introduce our speaker of today, who is going to deliver a lecture on agrarian crisis and farmers' distress in India. Has COVID-19 lockdown further deepened the crisis? This is the subject in which we should all uh, be deeply interested. The subject is based on very burning issue of now. Our speaker, Dr. D.K. Grover, is an eminent agriculture economist who has specialized in policy making framework, especially for rural and agrarian people of the country. Dr. Grover is presently working as a senior professor in very famous, very renowned university, that is Lovely Professional University, LPU, Punjab. And earlier to this assignment, he was director of Agroeconomics Center, Ministry of Agriculture, Government of India sponsored center at Punjab Agriculture University, Ludhiana. He has also served as World Bank consultant at Harmaya University, Ethiopia. I think it is earlier it was known as Alimaya University, Ethiopia, and visiting researcher at various international institutions like IFPRI, USA, International Rice Institute, Philippines, AVRDC, now known as World Vegetable Center, Taiwan. Dr. Grover has also contributed numerous research papers, and more than 200 research papers he has contributed in various research journals, nationally and internationally framed journals. Recently, he has co-authored a book, Glimpses of Indian Agriculture, published by Oxford Publication. So, on behalf of Jawaharlal Nehru Krishi Vishwavidyalaya, Jabalpur, Dean, College of Agriculture, Jabalpur, all the participants, please join me in welcoming Dr. D.K. Grover.
Thank you. Thank you.
So now, please, Dr. Grover, please carry on.
Thank you.
Okay, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much for introducing me nicely. And on the outside, first of all, I'm really thankful to Jawaharlal Nehru Krishi Vishwavidyalaya for giving me this platform to interact on the very topical issue with the so learned audience. I'm also very thankful to Department of Agriculture, Economics and Farm Management, College of Agriculture for organizing this lecture. And thank you, Dean of Agriculture and all those for giving me this opportunity to be among you. And the topic, which we have selected for today's discussion is agrarian crisis and farmer distress, which is not a new topic. And the agriculture has already been in crisis and farmer had already been in distress for quite a long time. So that's why I thought that, especially in the light of this COVID-19 lockdown, how the things have further worsened. So I thought that this would be the topic where we can speak on. So before I coming directly to the topic, it's as such clear that how the agriculture sector is important in an economy, and particularly in an economy of the developing nation. I would simply say that when no sector worked, no tertiary sector, no agriculture sector was there, existed even, agriculture sector did exist even then. And it has proved again that this during a COVID-19 lockdown, almost for the last 2 months, when all the other sectors, maybe industrial sector, manufacturing sector, tertiary sector, whatever sector, totally they were halted because of this lockdown. But the agriculture did not stop. So agriculture sector continue working and growing the crop and all those things. And moreover, you see that even this lockdown period, those three major essential services which were continued throughout, they were grocery shops, and the major products which are sold in the grocery shop, they are from the agriculture. And another equally important was the fruit and vegetable. And again, you know, that that was also a product of the agriculture. And third was milk and milk product. So taken together, you can simply see that during the last 2 months, all other activities were blocked or halted or closed down. But these three activities, they continue to work as the lifeline of the people. So that itself shows that how important is the agricultural sector. And formally, if we just see the importance, and we know that the agriculture sector is the primary sector which provide the foodstuff to the public, the population, which is a survival kit. And once they are survived, only then they can think of in terms of tertiary sector or in terms of industrial sector or other sectors. And also, you know, this agriculture sector provides a raw material which need to be processed by the industrial sector, or that is services provided in the tertiary sector. And moreover, this is also a hub where the agriculture labor is abundantly available, and slowly when we release the labor from agriculture to non-agriculture, so agriculture sector also provide labor force to develop the non-agriculture sector. So coming directly to the topic, you know, we'll see that how this agriculture, importance of agriculture is in terms of foodstuff. And first of all, I will start with this, that how the journey from food scarcity to so-called food surplus. Why I said so-called, I will tell you in the end of this, but right now we say that the journey from food scarcity to the food surplus, how we have achieved this. And everybody of us know that the post-independence era, what was the major challenge before the India? That was just the food grain production. The food grain production was so scarce that it was not, India was not able to feed their own population. And India used to import the wheat from US under PL 480. Everybody, those agriculturists, they know it at least. And you know, when we are importing the most essential commodity from any country, that has a lot of autonomy and political implications. So that is why when the planning era started in 1950, and just in the beginning of first 5-year plan, from 51 to 56 under the chairmanship of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, the first thing was discussed in the planning that how to strengthen the agriculture sector and hence the food grain. So the total focus of first 5-year plan was added to strengthen the food grain side so that we be self-reliant. And to our good luck, because we tried, and our good luck in 1960s, you know, that we got 2 gifts from the CGIAR, Consultative Agency on Indian Agriculture Research. One is from CIMMYT, another is from IRRI. And we got this Mexican wheat varieties which are dwarf in nature, that is from the CIMMYT. And few years later, we got Filipino rice varieties, those from IRRI, Philippines. And those varieties, when we adapted, in case of course, these kind of varieties were tried in the northern part of India, perhaps keeping in view the irrigation potential and all those things. And these 2 varieties, when we tried, and you see the yield level over a period of time not increase only by 5%, 10%, 50%, rather it get multiplied 3 times, 4 times. And it is the multiplication of the yield which has got multiplied by 3 or 4 times. That is why perhaps the term which was coined, that this is simply not an increase, this is a kind of revolution. So that revolution, green revolution, ultimately helped us improving our yield over the years. And resultantly what happened? In 1950-51, the total food grain production in the country was just 50.82 million tons. And in the recent year, 2019 and 20, this has increased to 292 million tons. And some people, they are more optimistic, they will see it will be 295 million tons. That doesn't make any difference. But my major idea is that over the period when we started and where we have ended up, the food production has increased almost 6 times. And at the same time, you know, food production increased, and the population part, at that time, if you just see in 50-51, we were just 36 crores. And now in 19 and 20, we have added 100 crore to that. So now we are 136 crore. So population also increased, but despite increasing the population explosion, but still you see the per capita availability of food grain that increased over a period of time. In 1960-61, the net availability per capita per day was 468 grams of food grains, and during 2017 and 18, this is 506 grams per day. And perhaps that is why the food scarce position has been turned into the food surplus, and the major credit goes to the farming community. And maybe because of this, the farmers, they are getting the honor, and we call them Annadata. And if you just see the buffer stock available, because you know that Government of India, they keep buffer stock to meet the emergency, food emergencies. So they have some requirement, quarterly requirement, that in the 1st of January, and then April, June, October, that how much total requirement is to maintain so far as the buffer stock is concerned. And again, part of that is an operational stock, and still part is a strategic stock which need to be kept to maintain the food grain during the emergent conditions. And I would like to share with you that in January 2019, the requirement of the buffer stock was 214 lakh million ton. That means 21 million tons, 214 lakh tons. And against this, the actual buffer stock available is 554 lakh tons. And if you see on the 1st April, the requirement was 210 lakh tons, and against that 463 lakh tons were available in our food stock. In July, similar, the requirement was 411, and we had 742 lakh tons. And October, 308 were the requirement, and 642 were the total availability in the buffer stock. And it just go to the last January 2020, if we just see, the requirement remains the same as of January 2019, and the availability in the stock, we had 565 lakh tons. And let me clarify that this availability of food grain, which I told you, that excludes the unmilled paddy, which is available with the government. I have not included. But if we include this also for 2020 January, so the total food grain availability, that is 751 lakh tons. So that simply shows that of the total requirement, which in the buffer stock we should keep, almost we have more than 3.5 times of the total stock which were required to be in the buffer stock, and we have 3.5 times of that. So that itself shows that we are naturally surplus, and over the period, the food grain situation has become very convenient. And here I also would like to say you that Punjab, which is just less than 2% of the country in size and everything, and the contribution of Punjab to the central pool, the wheat, that is 38% of wheat that is contributed to the central pool, and almost for the last 10-12 years that Punjab maintained this lead. And similarly, with regard to rice contribution to the central pool, since 2009-10, except 1 or 2 years when Andhra Pradesh was at the top place, but during other 10, 12 years, the Punjab that topped on the list and contributed around 29% of the total availability in the buffer stock in the central pool. So that simply shows, because rice perhaps is not a staple food in Punjab, whatever we produce, 10 to 15% we keep for home consumption, and rest 85, even more than that, we contribute to the central pool. And that all those things make the condition much more comfortable when we talk about the buffer stock and all those things. Until now, whatever we discuss, this is simply a successful story, because we say that how the things has happened and how the food scare position has been transformed in food surplus and everything. So, but at the same time, no, it's quite disheartening, you know, because farmers basically are the food producer. They are producing the food like anything. They have filled the buffer stock. They have multiplied the yield by 3 times, 4 times out of that. But despite all those things, you see, during the similar years, there are so many protests are being shown by the farmer community against the government, against the central government, against the state government, and so many, that there is a quite unrest among the mind of the farmer and farmers who we gave the honor of Annadata. And all those things, you know, when farmer there, we say they are in a problem, they are in distress. And the highest degree of distress can simply be when farmer they start to thinking to end their life. I'm referring to suicides. And you just see in India over the last during the 95 and 2016, 330,000 farmers they have committed suicide in 22 years. That is very, I mean, heartening. That, and if you just do a little bit arithmetic exercise, you will find 15,000 suicides per year. And going a little ahead, you will find 40 farmers, they commit suicide daily. On the one side, we say that food production has come down and everything worked very well, and India has a success story to learn that how the food scare situation has been transformed into food surplus. But on the other side, just see what is happening to the farmers. And this 22 years, the major hubs, the hotspot area have been like Karnataka, where when we say that number of people commit suicide per million of rural population, Karnataka is at the top, 56. Then Chhattisgarh, Maharashtra, Kerala, Andhra Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh. So all these have been treated as the hotspot of. And further, if you just see, we say that moreover around 52% of the farmers they are under debt in India, and of them around 82% farmers they are small and marginal farmer. So and we say that Punjab agriculture is a very developed agriculture. I also added a good part of the success story, that how much it contribute to the central pool. So even the advanced agriculture developed state like Punjab, that has not got any advantage over that. And the suicide, they are also being committed in Punjab, and farmers, they are equally distressed in Punjab too. There was one survey conducted from the door-to-door survey, and pertaining to the period 2010 and 17, this 8 years period, door-to-door survey was conducted by Punjab Agriculture University and some 2 other universities of Punjab. And when the door-to-door survey was conducted, that means the authenticity of data is quite high. So that shows that during the last 8 years, 16,000 suicides have been committed in Punjab, otherwise known as the food grain bowl of the country and food bowl of the country. And if you just do a little bit more exercise, you will find 2,000 per year, and again 6 per day. So that means these problems of distress and all those things, that is not restricted to a particular area, that has been across the state. So in all the state, farmers, they are feeling distress, and the highest degree of distress is suicide, which is being committed by them. And moreover, you know, the recent survey was conducted on 5,000 farm households, spreading on 18 states, and this survey was conducted by Social Science Research Institute. And recently that brought out that 76% farmer would prefer to quit agriculture, of course, if some alternative employment opportunities are given to them. Another equally alarming survey was conducted by NSSO. Recent survey on farmer situation assessment said that 40% farmer ready to quit agriculture if they get alternative employment. And there was one report published in May 2020 that says that 40 to 50% small and marginal farmer in Maharashtra, they are forced to leave agriculture and start working on the bigger farms as a wage earner. And in Punjab too, you know, there was a survey which was conducted, and 30 to 40% of the farmers, they showed that they don't want their next generation to come in the farming business. So now the question arises that on one side we say that agriculture sector with regard to food surplus has done wonder over the years. But at the same time, we see that because of those farmers who have been the major pivotal role in this increasing, and their position, financial position, that is going down and down. So there is a big conflict in that. So that is why sometimes I feel like that so many institutes, right from ICAR, then state agriculture universities, then state agriculture departments, then IFCO, CRIPCO, cooperative societies, NABARD, so many institutes, they are working, and their major idea of existence is to increase the agriculture production and farmers' welfare. In their presence, when they are concerned with the farmer welfare, in their presence, why the position of farmers, they are going down and down from bad to worse. So that is the point, that every of us, could be ICAR, could be state agriculture university, state agriculture department, all other institutions directly or indirectly involved in the agriculture development and farmer welfare, there is a time that each of one need to introspect that are we doing the right thing? We are doing our own way, and farmers are getting depressed and distressed and all those things. So we need to introspect, is something wrong with our functioning? Is the goal is clear to us? Is we are putting all the efforts to achieve those goal and all those things? So I think there is a time has come when every one of us need to do some introspection. Normally it is said that when the set of 4 economists are sitting, they don't normally agree with one thing. And that is why we said, if 4 economists are sitting, there could be 5 opinions. But at least you all will agree with me that on this issue, that agriculture crisis and farmer distress, all the economists, when they sit together, they agree to it. And when all economists, they feel like the same, that there is some issue. So that means that issue is a issue of real sense, which need to be taken up on a priority. Last year, I was in Manage to attend some seminar on agrarian crisis, and one of the speakers, they spoke, and the different speakers, they were telling that different reasons that why the agriculture crisis is there and why the farmers are depressed. And some of them, they say that perhaps in India, the irrigation level is less, that is why perhaps this crisis is there. Because we know that as the India level itself, around 50% of the area is irrigated and rest is rain-fed. But my question to them was, if you see that inadequate irrigation is one of the important reasons for this agriculture crisis and farmer days, then in Punjab, you see, 100% irrigation is there. And why the agriculture crisis and the farmer, they are distressed in Punjab? Then some speaker, they said that average holding size is very less for the India as a whole, which is less than 1 hectare, 0.94 hectare, and perhaps that is the reason that contribute towards it. And my simple query is that in case of Punjab, we have 4 times of the size of the holding. The average holding size is 3.77 hectare. Then if this is the region, and Punjab where the average holding size is 4 times, why there should be a crisis in Punjab then? And then they say that the yield level is low. If you compare the yield level of rice, wheat and maize, India versus Punjab, and you will see in case of Punjab, the yield is maybe in maize double than that of the Indian average, and in rice and wheat it is more than 1.5 times of that. But still, despite the highest yield, still there is a crisis, and Punjab is not spared out of that. Then people they say that the procurement is a real problem. Maybe India as a whole in certain states, though the MSP is announced, but only 10% procurement is factory procurement is there, and perhaps that is the reason. And I also contradict that in Punjab right now, it's 100%, almost 100% procurement is there. So my question is that it is not whether the agriculture is developed or is a less developed. All across India, all across the different kind of agriculture, whether it's a fully developed, half developed, developing, the problem of agriculture crisis and farmer distress, that has been everywhere. And now, where from the problem started, now I will need to go back to the Green Revolution. And this Green Revolution in 60s, and we know that this Green Revolution was restricted to Punjab, Haryana, and some western part of UP, where irrigation and all this underground water was assured. And the varieties which we got from cemetery area of this wheat and paddy, they were much more input intensive. They high yielding variety, they required a lot of irrigation, they required a lot of fertilizer, they required a lot of plant protection measures, and all the mechanization. And so all those things, have to be, and ultimately the high yielding varieties, and coupled with the government support. Government announced this MSP, and this is not only MSP that makes, but the question of how the effective procurement is there. So MSP along with the procurement which was there. So ultimately this belt, Punjab, Haryana and Uttar Pradesh, which is the major contributing to the central pool with regard to buffer stock and all those things. The yield has increased, and out of the higher MSP farmer, they also got their income high, and things were all the good. But now, where from the thing started, we got the higher yield, we got the high income at a very, very important cost. And what are those costs? First is, for example, the water depletion and the hydrological issues. You know that this rice is a water gulping crop. It requires a lot of water to produce this rice, and the rice was not at all a crop of this region first, because this being a semi-arid with around 50 centimeter rainfall, and even before the Green Revolution started, hardly any area was under rice crop in Punjab. And when we got these varieties coupled with the MSP, coupled with the procurement, all the support in research areas and all things technology oriented, farmer, they go on increasing the area under this, but that has certainly put an adverse effect on our underground water table. And this is the sustainability in one thing, when water is going down and down, so that put a lot of agriculture crisis, that maybe the tomorrow generation will not get sufficient water to survive on. Equally important is that it creates a distress of the farmer, because when the underground water is going down and down, all the tubal which was monoblock, now they are not able to lift the water because water has gone down and down. And farmers need to rebore, and putting all the extra cost on that. And when even the monoblock tubers stopped working, they shifted to the submersible. That involved a lot of investment, and that has put a lot of financial prices on the farming community, along with the sustainable issue as so far as the agriculture sector is concerned. 13 lakh tubers in Punjab, they are working all the way, and that too with the free power. There is no cost of power, so all the time it's a free, so subsidized, and that has put a lot of pressure on this underground water. And another is that the soil fertility, because when we are over exploiting the land, the fertility that also get deteriorated. And to maintain the soil fertility, what we are doing is we are adding more and more doses of NPK, nitrogen, then phosphorus, then zinc. So much more chemical fertilizer is being, and then again that create a ecological and environmental issue. At the same time, the cost enhancement, so that further give a a squeeze on the profitability of the farmer. So over the years, the agriculture, there is some disturbance, I think. Huh? Okay. So over the time, now the agriculture productivity that has more or less stabilized. We say that some percentage of increase we found, but it's not like the one we say double or triple or 4 times. So almost stabilized agriculture productivity, and at the same time input cost is increasing day by day, it's escalating. And I would like to say rather that, keeping in view perhaps that now we have a surplus food, perhaps the output prices in terms of MSP, that is not increasing, not keeping pace with the increasing cost of the production. So all these things, they have a very bad impact on the profitability, and hence the income of the farmer got reduced over times. And those who are economists, they have studied economics, there is a one effect, we say this is a ratchet effect. And ratchet effect simply tells us, if the income increase, high income, that will lead to the high consumption or high expenditure. But if somehow the income declined, low income, then it becomes very, very difficult for person to come down to earlier level of consumption. So expenditure or low income becomes very, very stressful. So as the income was increased, farmer, they have sufficient to buy, and now as their profit is getting squeezed, so financially they are now not in a position to go back to their old standard of living, and hence stress is there, and that is obvious also. Another which is a very important issue which has created agriculture crisis and farmer distress is, again I would like to refer from economists, there is a Kuznets hypothesis. The economist Kuznets, who has given the hypothesis, and he says that as the development process take place, economic development or economic growth that take place, that means tertiary sector and industrial sector, they also grow. So he said 2 things. One is the share of agriculture sector to the nation's GDP, that declines. And also proportionately the labor engagement in agriculture sector, that also declines. And what has happened in case of Indian agriculture, one part of Kuznets hypothesis that did very well, but other could not do that well, and that created a lot of distortions. And which has done good, the share of agriculture toward the GDP, that of course declined drastically over a period of time in India. If you just in 50-51, 57% of the total GDP that used to come from agriculture sector, and that has gone down to 40% in 80-81. Again 17% only in 2009 and 10, and right now in 18 and 19 it is around 15%. State farmer from 57% to 15% it has come down. So that is obvious, no issue, that is in line with the development. But the second important issue, which was also equally important, that the labor engagement in agriculture sector should also decline proportionately, because in all the developed country you will see that the agriculture, they contribute only 4-5-6% to the GDP, and similar proportion of the labor engagement in the agriculture sector. But in India, what has happened, that 72% people were engaged in agriculture during 50-51, and that has reduced to 69, then 56. Still now more than 45% people, they are still engaged on agriculture sector. So now the 15% income, which is the contribution of agriculture to GDP, that is being distributed about 45% of people, those who are engaged in agriculture sector. And just see their per capita income of those who are directly or indirectly dependent on agriculture sector, their per capita income get reduced, and kind of inequality have emerged over time. And this also give a lot of stress on the farmer, and that is why the condition of the farmer are the distressed. And why it has happened, why more and more people could not go to for the alternative employment. Simple thing is that our non-farm sector perhaps did not do that well to absorb the additional people coming from agriculture sector in the non-farm sector. And right now, let me openly say it out. Whatever you talk about, I personally feel that the problems today agriculture sector is facing, the solution of those problems perhaps does not lie within the agriculture sector. The solution lies in outside the agriculture sector. When I say outside agriculture sector, I mean non-farm sector. And non-farm sector, if we will develop and people, they will start going from agriculture to non-agriculture sector who are disguisedly unemployed right now, only then things will start getting. And if I take you to the theory of economics, there are so many models started from the economist Lewis, then another economist Rannis, then Fay, then Jorgensen. All those economists, they were the economists of development. They all suggested that over a period of time, more and more people should be shifted from agriculture to the non-agriculture sector, because everybody of us know that agriculture has some upper limit. Beyond that, yield cannot be increased. Beyond that, labor engagement cannot be increased. So alternative is to just create a non-farm sector where more and more people are employed and there will be less burden on agriculture. For example, if I say, if a two brother or the two people, they are working on a farm of 4 acres, and whatever they earn, that is divided among two. And if one of them get alternative employment in the non-farm agriculture sector, and only one is left on the agriculture, perhaps the thing would be better. And when we say that doubling of income, I think that is one of the way we can double the income. So still, if not specifically doubling, but still it will have a lot of impact on improving the income of the farmer family. And why these people, they are not going to the non-farm agriculture sector? Because of the faulty or inadequate industrial policy too. Because right now the non-farm sector which is being developed, that is being developed only on the already developed clusters. Because the new industry, they want to take the advantage, externalities, that where all those things are there, we should go there to reap the advantage. But now the time has come when, if we are bringing the people from rural people to urban area, that also create a lot of problem. Like when people, they are coming, lot of problem like slums and all those things are coming because people, they don't have sufficient income to live in the urban area. So that's a problem. So the latest model in this regard on the migration, that is a Michael Todaro model, who said that now the time has come that we should not shift people from rural area to urban area. Yes, shifting the people from agriculture to non-agriculture, but not shifting the people from rural area to urban area. So idea simply that gives us idea that now the time has come when the industry that should be pushed towards the rural area. People should not come in the urban area to get alternative employment. Rather, your location of industrial focal point should be like that, so that it should be in the range of the people. And we did analysis a few years back, and where we said that if industry is located in the radius of 9-10 kilometers, then farmer in the morning, they come on bicycle, they get employment in industrial sector, work all the day, in the evening they go back and join their home. If that model can be practiced, there will be no issue, because he's coming, he's not burden on urban area, no slum is coming, no lifestyle is increasing, no cost. He's coming in the industrial area, work all the day, go back on bicycle and live in the same house and share the income with their brother and all those which are left in the agriculture sector. So we should start thinking on this. And if you see the literature, in 1996, the World Bank itself suggested Indian people that 40% of the Indian people who are working in agriculture sector, they should leave agriculture sector. 1996, it was suggested by the World Bank. But perhaps because of the availability of the alternative employment opportunities, the things didn't happen. And still, a big chunk of the people, they are dependent on agriculture sector, which is creating inequalities and hence creating a distance for the farmer. And now we see, as we have discussed, that now the the food surplus situation we are feeling in India, that we have sufficient food, buffer stock is 3 times, 4 times. And this is the position globally also. Right now, there is no food shortage internationally as well as nationally. And the principal economics simply say when there is no when there is already surplus, why there should be a priority to that sector. To me, it appears that perhaps agriculture has not been that priority area as it used to be during the first 5-year plan or so. And now, keeping in view the food surplus and all those things, it has not got that priority, it appears to me. And at the same time, you know, when there is a lot of surplus, it makes sense on the economic angle that why the MSP, more and more MSP should be given. Already when there is a, because when MSP determine, lot many factors are to be kept into consideration. What is the food surplus availability nationally, internationally? What is the input cost parity? What is the output cost parity? So many things, you know, need to be kept in mind. And it is very, very evident that if we say that food surplus is there, then if we expect that government will give very high ups in MSP in the time to come, perhaps that is our expectations. And we know that higher the expectations, higher the frustrations. So we should also understand when the things are become surplus, that product has not the value when the value which they enjoy during the scarcity period. And here everybody is interested on MSP and all those things. And we know there is a MSP controversies going on. And MS Swaminathan, the report, along with many other recommendations, he also gave on this recommendation that farmers should be given remunerative prices so that they will be out of this distress and crisis. So keeping on that, he suggested to make it remunerative, it should be given cost C2, which is the total cost of production. C2 and 50% of this to be added if we want to make the farming remunerative. If we want people should not leave agriculture, then perhaps this is the thing. And at the same time, now new economists, they say that it's not cost C2 plus 50%, but will give cost A2 plus family labor and 50% of that. So A2 plus FL 50%, and another was demanded was C2 plus 50%. There is no less difference in this. If you go simply the cost of cultivation data that is collected, got collected by the government of India, that itself is show that almost the difference is double. If cost C2 and the cost A2FL, that is just a half of that. And if you actually take the rental value of the land on which the farmer they leased in, it is just a 35 to 40%, which is A2 plus FL. So there is a great difference, you know. And still I believe that if C2 plus 50% is assured to the farmer, the agriculture distress to greater extent it will evaporate, and the farmer, they will be getting remunerative price and all those things. Rather, I would say that this MSP scenario should be widened. Right now, the MSP is given for 23 commodities, again, 70-80 commodities are produced all the in India. So it should be, and later on now you see, come back to APMC, which is also a post-lockdown reform announcement which has been announced by our finance minister. They say that Agriculture Produce Marketing Committee Model Act, which was made in 2003, they say we are just liberalizing it. So that simply implication is that now you can sell the commodity anywhere you feel like. It's not only to the RTs, those who have a license, you can sell them. You can sell them anywhere within the state, outside the country, wherever you feel like you can. But you know, my simple question is it a favor to the farmer, or it is some future stress creating strategy for the farmer? I simply raise this question that 85% of the total farmers in India, they are small and marginal. And small and marginal farmers are those whose land holding is less than 5 acres, with very little market built surplus. Do you think how they will take this advantage of freedom wherever they sell it? Do you think they will be able to take all their product to where it's required, lot of transportation cost, lot of knowledge, lot of information. So I personally believe that 85% farmer, small and farmer with the very, very less marketable surplus will not be in a position to take advantage of this liberalization. Then people, they start coming up that for that the FPO role is very, very important. Of course, yes, because when the farmers are very small, then farmer producer companies, organization, they have to come together and work together to increase the bargaining power of the farmer. That's true. But looking at the present status of FPO, right now in India, there are 6.5 lakh villages. And so far as the FPO are concerned, there are only 6,000 FPOs. And out of that, only 3,200 are the farmer producer companies. And all other, either they are cooperatives or societies. And many of them, few of them, yes, I know that some Samruddhi, Mahila in Rajasthan, that's working good. Then Ram Rahim company, that is working good. Kamradi Progressive, that is in Telangana, that is going good. But we can, success story of this FPO, we can just count on finger. Many of them, they are not perhaps feasible. Neither they are feasible technically nor financially. And when we say cooperative, then people, they should get together and sell their product together and all those things. In the cooperative movement itself, post-independence, and we know that it was the slogan that cooperation has failed, but it must succeed. And those things which have failed a long time, it becomes very, very difficult to revive. I mean, I'm not very, very optimistic that cooperation society, cooperative will come up to take these all things. But now, what I personally feel is, if all of you have listened carefully, the post COVID-19 lockdown reform announcement made by the Honorable Finance Minister of the country. So there is a one message, simple one message, that is a one buzzword, which is a privatization, or you can say corporatization. Where starting from mines to spice, all things we are moving towards the privatization. And when liberalizing this APMC Act, sometimes it gives me blame that perhaps this is also one way to privatize the whole marketing process of agriculture produce in India too. And maybe, I mean, being an economist, I have my personal opinion on that. So what I personally feel, is it not a step towards dismantling this procurement policy under MSP and all that? Maybe in coming 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, if this is dismantled, and then that will further create a distance for the farming. So one should read between the lines that how this APMC is, whether it's going to be a liability or an asset. Because one of my very senior colleague, who is a very renowned agriculture scientist in Bihar, post APMC liberalization, we were chatting on the Facebook, and he told that in Bihar it was already liberalized. Farmers, they were allowed to sell the crop anywhere they want to do. But in Bihar, the farmer never got a remunerative price. So if in Bihar, when already the things were liberalized, farmer didn't get remunerative price, and 85% of the small and marginal farmer, how much bargaining they have to strengthen their fiscal or other conditions. So one should need to look at this also. And there are other issues, sometimes conflicting policies. We have a federal structure in India. Certain goals that is on the union list, certain things on the state list, and certain on the concurrent list. And agriculture is treated as a state subject. That means all the agricultural policy related issue that can be taken as by the state itself. But you see, had it been used, for example, export and import, who decide export and import? How much buffer stock we have to keep? How much export to be there? How much import to be there? Who decide this? Is it any state government? No. Right? That is the central government who decide the export policy. And then fertilizer prices. Who decide the fertilizer prices? There is a special ministry for fertilizer prices, and that is in the control of the central government. Then buffer stock, how much to keep and how much to liberate, that is also the decision undertaken by the union government. Then MSP is also decided by the central government. So in all the central government intervention in a greater way, if we say that agriculture is a state subject, so perhaps again things need to be reinvented. And under such a situation, we say that agriculture policy of the state that become ineffective. And very nice example I can quote here because of the conflicting policies. In Punjab, you know, as I told you that perhaps paddy was not the crop which it was cultivated before the event of the Green Revolution. Perhaps this was an alien crop for the Punjab. And being a water gulping crop, it's only 1986, in only just you see 17-18 years from 71 onward, the agriculture scientists, water scientists, sorry. Hello, is it okay? Hello.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay, because it was just a disturb. So all the scientists in the state of Punjab, they realized that perhaps we won't be able to cultivate this paddy on a larger area. And at that time in 1986, the total area under paddy was 22 lakh hectares. And all the scientists, they say that 22 lakh hectare area we cannot afford. It's not sustainable, keeping in view our underground water position, how much water we extract and how much retention is there. Perhaps it's not possible. And at that time, the Honorable Dr. S.S. Johal, renowned agriculture economist of this region and for India as a whole internationally, he gave in 1986, perhaps the things are not moving in the right direction, and time has come when we start thinking curtailing the area under paddy crop. And keeping in view the water retention and extension of, it was decided perhaps that Punjab is just able to keep only 15 lakh hectare area under paddy. So we had a 22 lakh hectare area, and the natural resources permitted us that we can sustain 15 lakh. So idea was just to reduce 7 lakh hectare area to make paddy cultivation sustainable. And for that, all the efforts they were made, and all the slogan and all those things that we should diversify, we should diversify. And you know what has happened? The idea was just to reduce the 7 lakh hectare area. And ultimately, we have end up to plus the 7 lakh hectare area. We were to go from 22 lakh hectare area to -7, 15 lakh hectare area. And we went up 22 plus 7, 29 lakh hectare area. Because there was a conflicting policy adopted by the central government as well as the state government. Central government is giving MSP only for rice and wheat. Procurement is only for rice and wheat. All the agriculture university, they have a thrust research area on paddy and wheat. All the infrastructure, market infrastructure, that is rice and wheat. So on what basis we will see that farmer will not grow paddy? So when some conflicting policies are there, and the Punjab government is trying to reduce the area under the paddy, and central government is making all the encouraging policies to boost the area, where we will go? We'll go one step ahead and two step back. So that was the reason that we say that in conflicting policies of the center and state, when they are not in a harmony, that creates a lot of problem to achieve the targeted milestone in agriculture. And even within the state government also, it is in conflicting. On one side, government of Punjab, they say that we should reduce the area on paddy. On the other side, we are giving a free power subsidy to all the farmers. Water is free and power is free. You just lift as much as water you can lift, and what underground water is going and down and down. And when you are giving free hand to lift as much water from underground as much, why the farmer will leave this paddy? So again, that is a conflicting policy within the state government too. So because the issue was so high on priority that even in 2009 itself, the Punjab government, they passed one act known as Preservation of Subsoil Water Act. And that act was simply to say that we are to save the underground water, and based on that, they recommended that paddy should not be transplanted before the 20th June. Why 20th June? Because this is more close and this period coincide with the arrival of the monsoon, and when monsoon comes in, the water burden on the underground water that get reduced, and that will be good enough. So on the one side, we are proving this kind of act. Another side, we are giving the free power subsidy to the farmer to lift as much as water. So sometimes, these kind of policies, they are self-contradictory, and we are not clear what we want to achieve, and that is why perhaps things are not achieved the way we have intended to do that. And even this analysis, some people, they have done the analysis that before this act 2009 and after the impact was that before this impact was enacted, the underground water reduced by 0.9 meter per annum. And after this act was enacted, the water got reduced by 0.7 meter per. So there is a net saving of 0.2 meter per annum. That's a good saving also. But for that, the policy should not be those much conflicting. And so far as this we come the lockdown and how it has impacted the agriculture, whether this has further created a problem for. So I would say that the timing of this lockdown was very, very crucial, because out of the 12 months, these 3 months time in agriculture, that is very, very crucial when farmer has to harvest Rabi crop and then process everything and to sell it off, making all the arrangement, and then arranging the inputs to sow for the Kharif crop. And so that is the time when this 3 month or 2 month lockdown COVID. So that has really impacted the whole two main crops, major in Kharif season, we say paddy and Rabi wheat. So Rabi and paddy, they are both impacted like anything because the timing from the agriculture point of view, the time was very, very strategic in nature when this lockdown came on. And if you just see, this lockdown, all the activities were restricted. No tractor movement was there, no repair shop was opened. So migration, the labor problem was there. So keeping all these things during the harvesting period under a set of so many restrictions, what has happened? Farmer had to go a long way and incur a lot of additional cost because labor. And this time, there was not a free movement. The product was not simply taken from the farm to the market, because first the farmer has to harvest the crop, upload on trolley, take to their home, download, keep there for some time, and when he will get the pass to take his produce to the market, again he will upload the crop product and take to the market, and double transportation and double marketing labor problem. And that has really have created a very bad impact on the cost of production. Cost of production definitely have increased over this. And moreover, this is the time when the diesel price was also increased. And you know that once the price of diesel and petrol has increased, certainly that has a lot of spiraling effect that most of the things that get increased, especially the transport sector. So double transportation farmer has to incur, first take the crop from the farm to home and then from home to market when he get the pass to go to the market to sell off the crop. And similar, the problem is now that the paddy transplanting system has also. And we know that with regard to migrant labor, most of the people, they have gone back to their houses. And now the problem is that farmer, they are getting the wages on at most 1.5 times of the wage rate. So that will again create a lot of problem so far as we think that the cost of production of coming Kharif crop, that also would increase. So in that way, high labor problem, most transportation cost, and the diesel price increase, that has created, have a very number of good economic implications for the farmer. His fiscal thing has disturbed a lot. And so we say diversification, and some of the farmer which grew this fruit and vegetable, they were the most sufferer. And especially vegetable growers, they were the most sufferer during this lockdown. They didn't know how to, why they pick up, because there was no mobility. They could not transport their crop to the market, mandis. All the mandi were closed, on the road was closed. but crop will not wait, vegetable will not wait to ripe. They will ripe at their own time. So most of this vegetable grower, they were at the total disadvantage. I tell you this lockdown and other thing, they will create this agriculture crisis and farmer distress in much deeper way, And this is with regard to this farmer distress and this economic implication and all those. Even with regard to the sustainability issue, you see, I just mentioned you that this government in 2009 that passed this Preservation of Subsoil Water Act. So we say that paddy need to be transplanted 20th June onwards. And now because farmer, they are saying that it's only 20-25 days when whole of the paddy has to be transplanted. And if we start the paddy transplantation in 20th June, perhaps we won't be able to complete our transplanting. And that is why now they are saying that to taper with this act of Preservation and Subsoil Water Act, and they say that government should allow them to start transplanting with effect from 1st June, 20 days ahead of the decided earlier. And now some kind of bargaining is going on, and ultimately government of Punjab that has agreed to give 10 days to them. They say, okay, 10th June is okay. But still, I don't think that farmer, they are satisfied. And let's see how this bargaining further go in terms of populist policy and all those things. And if we are tapering with this Preservation of Subsoil Water Act, and we know that if we will cultivate before the 20th June 2000 days, then perhaps the underground water would have a more pressurized, and that will go down and down by 0.2 meter more than. So that again will create a sustainability issues and all those things. So, and I'll just take 5 minutes more, because I promise you when I said that journey from scarcity to so-called food surplus. So when I said so-called food surplus, I just wanted to tell you that whether we are really food surplus country or not. And right now, if you just see, in India, 270 million hungry people are there. And if you go by the Oxfam Food Availability Index, India stands 97th position. And if you just see Global Hunger Index, India has 102 position. Out of 117, those who participated in this qualifying country, out of 117 countries, India's position is 102 with regard to Global Hunger Index. And moreover, I would like to tell you, when we say that India is a food surplus, somebody say India is a net exporting country. So they should also, I just want to sensitize them also. Even the FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, they have defined 3 levels of self-sufficiencies. First, they say if the production of food grain is below 80% of the requirement, so we say that situation is of food deficit. And second situation, if a country's food production vary between 80 to 120%, then we say self-sufficiency. If 120% you are producing, it's not surplus, it's a self-sufficiency. Because one drought year you cannot bear if you say that we are self-sufficient or surplus. And third condition, he say that if the food grain production in any country is more than 120%, then we can say we are food surplus. And based on these 3 indicators given by FAO, we are at number 2. We are not at number 3. So India is not food surplus. If we are producing 20% more than of the requirement, we come in the second category where we say it's a self-sufficiency. And again, I would just tell you, if all the 270 million hungry people they are to feed, perhaps the total surplus we are talking about, that will be simply be wiped out. At one time, now we are enjoying the thing that we are the net exporter of this. What we are exporting, you just see. Wheat, there was only one drought in 2016 that compelled us to import 6 million ton of wheat from outside. So is this a sustainability? We say that we have sufficient wheat to export, and moreover, the wheat is not competitive in the international market, will not find competitive advantage even to export. So far as the edible oils and pulses. You know, we are the importer, and we have been regularly importing this for the last 2 decades. And what we are exporting is rice. Rice we are exporting. And I don't think that rice India should export. It doesn't come under the sustainable development goals even. When we are exporting 1 kg of rice, that simply means we are exporting 4,000 liters of water. And on one side, we say that we are to increase the water efficiency, per drop output efficiency, and all those things, that underground water is going down and down. And we are compelling the farmer to grow this paddy on those areas where the crop has been alien, like Punjab, where this crop is not suitable for that area. We are compelling those that you just produce it, and for production of 1 kg of this rice, 4,000 liters of water is consumed. And if we are exporting 1 kg, we are exporting water. So again, I think keeping in view the sustainable development goals of the country, long term, perhaps these rises. So on the whole, we cannot simply say that India is a surplus country, we are net exporter country, and all those things. India should just right now think about that still we are to go a long way, and they should give value to the farmer, they should give the remunerative price to the farmer, so that farmers feel encouraged, they continue doing this over a period of time, so that the country doesn't face any problem. And just in 3 minutes, I will just give policy suggestions. One is, of course, this, that just looking at the challenges still with regard to food surplus, the MSP portion should be continued. If the APMC is approved as such, it's okay, but if start producing liability, it should be taken away if it creates a problem for the farmer, and it need to be. Then there should be harmony between the state agriculture policy and central government policy, because otherwise 1 step go and 2 step backward will not take you. Non-farm sector should be fully developed, and that should push towards the rural area. If we want that the people on agriculture sector, they have to shift from agriculture to non-agriculture sector. And over the years, when we see that food production is surplus, both private and public investment has declined over the period in agriculture, which need to be strengthened to give this cold value addition, processing, storage, transportation. So these kind of public-private investment should be made in a larger way. And of course, we talk about subsidy. Nowhere in the world agriculture survive without subsidy. And similarly, we say that here also. But of course, we say that there should be a rationalization of subsidy. Those who really deserve, small and marginal farmer, subsidies should be given to them. And so if we do like this, perhaps we can take the farmer on the board, that they will feel encouraged to continue with their production and all those things, and India again will be on there. So with this, I end my lecture here. Thank you very much. Hello.
Thank you.
Hello.
Thank you, sir.
डॉक्टर आशुतोष
हाँ सर, आवाज आ रही है?
आशुतोष
हाँ।
बोलो, आशुतोष।
Sir, can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure. But I am getting that 9% of the internet you have consumed, it's only 10%. You can do this question session, quickly.
Okay, Dr.
Yeah,
Thomas.
Yes, sir. Sir, I'll say 3 points and then I'll ask a question, sir.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Dr. Moni Thomas.
Okay.
Sir, India is respected because of its brain power and brain power, sir. And then 2 slogans work very well in agriculture. I'm thankful for your detailed lecture, but then I'm raising certain questions based on some facts. There were 2 important slogans, sir.
Mm-hmm.
One was Jai Kisan and Jai Jawan and Jai Kisan. That was by
Yeah.
Lal
Right.
Bahadur Shastri or
Yeah.
PM. And then Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan and Jai Vigyan was added by our late Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee.
Yeah.
Now, sir, coming to it, the investment in defense is 5.7% in defense research of its budget. Secondly, sir, we are investing very much in farming sector, I mean farmers. But the investment in agriculture research is 0.3% of the agriculture GDP or 0.6% of total GDP of India, sir. This is second point. Third point, as you pointed out very rightly, sir, the total factor productivity is slowing down in recent years, and it is between 0.9 to 0.9 to 4. Is it not, sir?
Yeah.
And I'm coming to my question is, with this level of investment in agriculture research, that is either 0.3% or 0.6%, will we be able to achieve higher growth rate that is targeted for 1.63 billion people in 2020? One thing. Secondly, according to the budget of aiming 5 trillion economy, 1 trillion economy is expected from agriculture sector. With this sort of investment in research, are we going to touch this target set up by Government of India? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, okay, because many things you have just quoted to me, because I also told you that keeping in view now they have started thinking that perhaps we have food surplus and agriculture is no more a priority. And what to talk about Indian research and development budget on agriculture even.
आप वोट ऑफ थैंक्स आप कर देते.
ओके ओके.
आशुतोष, वोट ऑफ थैंक्स के लिए
वो दीपक आ रहा है.
आज बुलाओ, दीपक को कॉल करो.
Sir, I am here, sir.
Yes.
Can I start, sir?
Yes.
Well, on behalf of our university, Jawaharlal Nehru Krishi Vishwavidyalaya, Jabalpur, I am very grateful. It is my unique privilege to give thanks to Dr. Grover. Before that, I would like to give my sincere thanks and for organizing such events to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir, and all the dignitaries of the university, those who are guiding us to have this kind of lecture, which are really thought-provoking and knowledge-enhancing. And thanks to the dignitaries and our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Dr. P.K. Bisain, sir. Though he is from agriculture economics subject, he is delighted to have this kind of lecture after listening to Dr. Grover's lecture, sir. Dr. Grover, sir, we always love to listen because your lectures are always knowledge enhancing and thought provoking. Really, it's a very nice lecture, and on behalf of our Dean, who is Dr. R.M. Sahu, sir, who is head of the department also in our department, Agriculture Economics and Farm Management, and on my own behalf, on behalf of the students and all the dignitaries and the faculties of different universities, different fraternities. Really, we are very much thankful to Dr. Grover, sir, who has given the real situation, and in totality, he has given all the information about the agriculture distress crisis and the post-COVID management. If this will be followed, reflected. Thank you very much, sir. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you everyone.
Sir, हो गया, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Hello.
Thank you.